guys, welcome back. Good morning. It's another one of those days that the small one has decided to take a short nap. So I'm going to take the opportunity, and I don't know how long I have. So it's the most makeup I've worn in a while. I'm starting to feel more human. I don't know if you can tell. Also, watching these old videos has reminded me that I used to actually do something besides put my hair in a ponytail every day. What with work and then the baby and being pregnant and everything the last few years, I've just lived in a ponytail or a messy bun. Anyway, this video is actually titled Boring Questions. I feel like a complete ass for the things I was saying at this time. And at the time I felt that way, but I felt like I needed to get it out there. I needed to say it because I felt like there were other people that were feeling it, but they couldn't bring themselves to admit it. So this is a huge part of trauma that I didn't recognize at the time, but it also has something to do with being a third culture kid and just being completely overwhelmed with your own crap that you haven't ever gotten through, and you don't have any space for anyone else's. So that's a tiny disclaimer if I'm going to have one, because it's so hard for me to watch this video, but I feel like it's important to address it.
Hey guys, so it's serious time, and I want to address the fact that I personally have an issue with caring about people's lives.
See, I told you.
It sounds horrible to say it like that, but I don't know how else to explain it. I do love people, and I love to hear about them, and I think that they're interesting, and there's a lot of interesting stuff about even normal, boring people.
Oh,
I say normal and boring in the same sense because normal people do usually bore me. The people with a two-car garage and 3 siblings and the parents and just the American story, even if they have a different American story, it's still an American story. It's just boring to me. I've heard it a million times, but that's not their fault. And there's something about them that makes them them. And that's what I find fascinating. It's the little things that nobody ever asks you about, like how many brothers and sisters do you have? It's like, oh dear goodness, here we go again, I have 3 brothers. They're all younger than me, Let me give you my biography. It'll be shorter. I'll give you the condensed version. I think it's partly because I've just grown up giving my biography to people. I'm always the one being asked questions. And I've always felt like growing up as a missionary kid, right? People are always asking you questions. You're at a new church, you're at a new place, you're at a new school. Oh, they want to know all about you because you're the new kid. And you're fine as long as you're the new kid. But as soon as you're not the new kid anymore, and it's kind of like up to you to reciprocate and ask questions, I suddenly realize, that I have absolutely no interest in asking the same questions that they all ask me. Does that mean I don't care about them and I don't find their lives interesting or fascinating?
okay. So I still struggle, not with finding people interesting or caring about their lives the way I put it, but I think what I could say now, looking back, is small talk. Small talk, and I think it really came down to, at the time, I'd been in the United States at that point for, 8 to 10 years already. And I thought I had adjusted a lot into society, but it's really a cultural thing. It's a complete culture shock. So it's not even a shock anymore. It's just the ongoing reality of your world. So it's normal for people to ask you about your life. How many brothers and sisters do you have? If you're holding a baby, oh, how old is he? He's so cute. It's the things you're supposed to say. And I've never been very excited about the things that you're supposed to say. I'm really good at it, but I hate it. And I'm only good at it when I don't actually care about you as a person. If I just met you on the street, I'm really good at putting on the polite, friendly stranger. Oh, look how cute she is. Oh, is she learning to walk yet? Things like that, right? But when it comes to, I've now known you for 3 years, and I'm supposed to ask you questions that are considered small talk when I see you every once in a while, because I don't really, if I actually like you and I think you're a friend, then I'm going to actually ask you, hey, how did this go? I'm going to ask you specific questions. I'm going to actually know about your life, or sound like I care about or know about your life, because I want it to be clear that I want to go deeper than just how was Saturday, Did you have to work? Like, people don't necessarily want to answer questions about their job. Um, Personally, I never really enjoyed answering questions about my job. I mean, it's work. Why would I want to talk about it? I've done that for 5 days. Now let's think about something else. But I understand. It's a way of people interacting with you. It's the culture here in the United States, at least, probably around the world, I don't know, to be interested in, apparently, and to ask questions about your everyday life and your background and your history. And it's another reason that I always struggled with dating apps and stuff like that, because like you had to answer the same questions 50 million times, The first time you start a conversation with someone, it's almost always the awkward small talk phase beforehand. And I was just like, let's just dive right in, let's discuss the meaning of life. That's what sparks my interest. I thought I heard a baby. I'm going to do that at least once per video. I know I did it on the last one. So let's finish the video, but I don't know. I feel kind of all over the place.
Fascinating, but there's nothing about them that I would like to know. There's lots of things I would like to know about them, but they're not the things that come up in icebreaker situations where they ask you all the questions and then you ask them back. And then now you have all of this useless information about each other.
It's not useless,
but you feel like you know each other better because you have traded useless information. But there's not really been any meeting of the minds. You didn't say, oh, well, I like sauerkraut. And they say, oh, I really like sauerkraut too because of this and that and the other thing. And you're like, oh, well, that's interesting. They know about sauerkraut, something that most people don't talk about, okay? I'm talking about this because I went out with a friend, with my brother and his friend. Never met this guy until last night. And I realized that he fired off questions from the minute I got in the car. But as soon as he was done, and I felt, oh, yeah, that's right, it's culturally acceptable now to ask the questions back. I actually think about this stuff. Oh, I know this is the cue.
Like,
but all of a sudden, I've forgotten what to say.
I have to rack my brain.
It's like trying to speak another language. Oh, that's right. How do you say this in Spanish? How do you say it? There's something you're supposed to say right now, and I just can't remember the words. That's what I feel like.
And some of this might actually go back to the fact that I didn't grow up around a lot of other people that were my same age or that didn't already know all of these things about me. I didn't grow up meeting strangers or going to a school. So my brothers were my peers, and I didn't have a whole lot of peers that were not my brothers. So I feel like when those situations, I'm fine answering the questions, but as soon as I recognize, this is the social cue where it's now acceptable and appropriate for you to be interested in their life and ask them questions. It's like, even though they just asked me 10 or 15 questions, I couldn't tell you in that moment any of the questions that they asked me, because you would think, well, why don't you just repeat what they asked you and ask them back? The best I can do is ask them the question that they asked me last, because that's the only one I can remember. It's like I black out in those moments. It's like that time didn't exist. That didn't happen. It's like I've shut down and I'm just being a robot with the appropriate facial expressions when they're asking me all these questions. And then when the little light bulb comes on and I realize, they're going to feel like I don't care if I don't. I'm going to look rude if I don't. But then I realize in that moment, I'm also panicking because I don't know how to speak the language. I do, but because I panic, I'm less capable of speaking it than I even was before. If that makes any sense.
In those situations. And then I'm worried that it's because I don't really care about these people, because I don't give a crap about whatever the answer to the question would be that they just asked me.
You care about the person, but you don't care about the question, but you don't know what else to ask them. Yeah.
So maybe it's just me, maybe I'm just disillusioned, but I asked Nathan, because there came a point where it was just us. I said, are you feeling the same way as I am, that you actually don't care about these questions that they just asked us, you don't care to ask them back because you don't care about the answer, but it makes you feel like a bad person for not caring about that person's life. But it's not because we don't care, it's just because we don't value the superficial, the
So here I call it superficial. It's not necessarily that it's superficial. At the time, I was very antagonistic still against the American culture. I still didn't, I really didn't fit in still. I was really always wearing a mask, pretending, being a chameleon. And it was very, very aggravating because it was exhausting trying to fit in. And it wasn't like I was trying to fit in with all the cool kids. It was like literally I'm trying to make sure that I'm socially appropriate in social situations and interactions because I didn't grow up here. Even though I look and sound American, I'm not. And I'm tired. I'm tired of this. I would like to just be me. But whenever I was just me, I came off as rude or snobbish or uncaring and it wasn't that. It was just that my culture is not American. But I can put it on and I can take it off again. But I was tired of having to put it on. I was throwing a fit.
small talk, the all the useless information that apparently you have to get out of the way before you can ask something like, where does sauerkraut come from?
I don't know where
Or
the
why don't you
sauerkraut
wear sunglasses?
thing came
Oh,
from.
well, it turns out that's actually a really interesting story. He didn't just leave them at home or in the car. He just doesn't like to wear sunglasses. Oh, well, why? Well, that's an interesting answer. The story behind it, I'm not going to tell it, but we finally managed to learn things that do interest us, but it's because we don't waste time asking the questions that everyone expects us to ask. But do you ever find yourself in that position? Is it just me and my brother? Uh, is it a TCK thing?
It is.
Or
To
is
some
it
extent.
just a random personality thing where you just really don't care about the answer, but you do care about people, yet admitting that you don't care about asking these questions makes you actually, in this culture, in the American culture, it means that you're uncaring, even though you're not.
So I've always been triggered by this, and clearly back in this time frame, I was really often very triggered because I was interacting with a lot of strangers. I had been running a store before this, right before this, so I was dealing with customers all day long, and I was just exhausted. I was socially, mentally, emotionally, and physically, actually, at this point, exhausted. So I'd just finished doing a mountain of work and I was triggered, which meant that I was very defensive about this and very antagonistic. My partner saw the last video I made and he said, "It's interesting seeing this version of you." He said, "I can tell you're very," he's like, "it's not angry, but you're very aggressive." And I was like, I mean, I didn't necessarily see that in my old videos, but I mean, if you look in my eyes, I am kind of beady eyed. Like, my face isn't open, I don't think. I'm very closed. I'm still very closed off. Like, I'm pretending, not pretending. I think I'm being open, but I'm still very closed off and very defensive. I'm definitely in a defensive posture. And it's probably why my back hurt so much back then. But anyway, let's finish it off.
Just because you don't care about particular questions and answers that are a given, a norm to be asked before you are allowed to feel acquainted with this person enough to ask the interesting questions. I just want to dive right in, you know? I just don't find.
Okay, so this is another thing. If you're a third culture kid and you're watching this, because I'm pretty sure most of the views in my channel are from third culture kids, at least from this time. That's a third culture kid thing, right? What I just said. Let's rewind, because I've already forgotten what it was.
You know, I just don't find the small talk fascinating.
I want to dive right in.
Maybe it's because I don't value my own answers that I give people.
There's that.
You know, where are you from? How many people do you have in your family?
So when I said I want to just dive right in, this is a phenomenon that is common among third culture kids. And we all, not all of us, but many of us recognize it now, right? When you meet another third culture kid, it's like you've known each other your entire life. It's just a thing. I don't know how to explain it. It just is. You don't even have to have grown up in the same country with the same kind of people speaking the same language. You don't have to both be born Americans and have lived overseas. You could be born in the Netherlands and have lived in South America, and I could have been born in the United States and then lived all my life in Russia. But if we meet, there's an instant connection, and it's almost like you're instantly friends for life. And those friendships, they do ebb and flow. I mean, the other thing is I may not talk to you again for 10 years. But when I do talk to you again, it's like we were never apart. That's the culture. That's where I'm coming from. So these social situations with Americans just really frustrated me because I was just like, look, I have limited energy, and that's part of the trauma, part of the PTSD thing. I didn't realize how much of my energy was being taken up by emotional trauma and exhaustion and just the internal darkness that existed here, that was so much work keeping it inside and keeping it pushed down, and everything that I took in was getting added to the top of it. And I just wanted to be able to dive right in. Let's just get down to it. Let's decide if we like each other or not. Let's decide if this friendship is worth being here. And that sounds really crude, really, really like abrasive, but I'm used to meeting people and being instant friends and knowing each other like you've known each other your entire life. And you can go straight into talking about the meaning of life and, whether or not the flat earth is real. Like, that's not a conversation I'm interested in having, but it's one of those things where you can just dive straight in, right? And Americans, that's not the culture. That's not the culture. You have to play the, hi, how are you? How many brothers and sisters do you have? Oh, I like hamburgers too. And it can sometimes take a very, very, very long time to get down to the meat of things. But that definitely is a third culture kid thing right there. And also my level of exhaustion with this and my inability to care about playing the game was because I had so much stuff that I needed to handle and deal with that I didn't have energy to care about anybody else. So this is where I come from saying I feel like I don't care. I didn't, but it's not because I'm an uncaring person, but that was a difficult thing for me for many years. I honestly thought deep down I must be a terrible person because I just didn't have the energy to care to the degree that I felt like I should. And as I've worked through my traumas, I've gotten to the place where I do feel like I do have more energy and more interest in other people around me. And so as that's happened, I've recognized, yeah, okay. I knew I really wanted to believe this was true, but I wasn't sure. But it's true. The more baggage you shed, the more free hands you have to carry somebody else's backpack for a second, or to pat them on the back or give them a hug. Your hands aren't full of baggage anymore. So now you actually have energy to give out into the world a little bit instead of just being drained yourself. So anyway.
Where are you going now? What do you plan on doing with your life? I find all that extremely boring, but I've been asked that since I was 2 years old, and I have to give a short biography at every new church and every new school and everything, Maybe it's because I don't value my own answers, so I can't imagine.
The other thing is this level of social exhaustion that was just part of our lives. It wasn't at this point for me. Well, it kind of was, but not because of the churches and all of that. But living your entire life being pushed into social interactions that you were not ready for and you were too exhausted to handle, but because your family had to go or was supposed to be there and you had to put on the happy, fun face and wear the nice clothes that you couldn't afford, you were forced into these interactions, and it made you hate them all the more,
That they would value it, but I know they do. I know better, but I can't bring myself to care. Are you in the same spot?
Anyway, that was an interesting video for me to watch. Kind of cringe, but I felt like it was important. So if I had to boil it all down, I would say a huge part of where I was coming from at that time was definitely the third culture kid aspect and the social requirements and the cultural differences and the struggle, and also just the fact that there was so much emotional repression and physical and mental exhaustion. And I just didn't have the energy to care about other people because I had so much that I was carrying. I was carrying so many bags and trunks and everything that I didn't even realize it because I couldn't see it. I was like, I'm fine. I'm great. But I was carrying so much baggage that I didn't have room for anyone else. And that was really the truth. And I can look back and see that now and recognize that I'm not a terrible person and I wasn't then. But the only way that I actually became sure that it had a lot more to do with the baggage I was carrying than the fact that I was a terrible person. I mean, the way I got there was by working through my trauma and in a lot of ways and recognizing, the more baggage I shed, the more room and energy and space I have for other people in my life. And the more time I feel like I can give to people without feeling drained and exhausted. I'm still a pretty big introvert. I'm perfectly fine not seeing people outside of my partner and my child probably, maybe once a month. I'm perfectly fine. But a lot of other people need to be able to see us like twice a week. And I'm like, okay, I will make the sacrifice and I will do what I need to do because that's important to them. And I want that to be something that they can do. But it's still kind of exhausting for me. But sometimes you do what you need to do for other people. But I have the energy and the ability to do that now. And before, it would have just completely shut me down. So if you're a third culture kid and you've dealt with any of this, that was 10 years ago now, and this is 10 years in the future. And I think it's still true for a lot of people. It's not so much as it's not as true for me anymore. But I can see where I was, and I understand just how much I was dealing with, and I have some compassion for my former self, no matter how terrible it sounded to hear me say those things out loud. I think it was therapeutic for me to say them at that time. So anyway, thank you guys for joining me, and I will see you again next time, maybe later today with another video, depending on how much time I have, because I have to get it in when the baby's asleep, or when he's happy, which usually is when he's asleep right now. So I'll see you guys next time. Bye.